Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Football House. I'm Sam Basil, joined alongside Cole Hughes and Jake Zimmer. And guys, we're here for week 13 of the college football season in 2025. We are just a couple weeks away from the final unveiling of the college football playoff bracket, and there's still a lot of ground to cover for a lot of teams around the country. So, guys, first off, I want to kind of get into it. Very tight in a lot of these power conference races. There's still a lot of conference championship games that are still unsettled, and a big result that is going to affect those conference championship games was last week's game of the week between Alabama and Oklahoma. Oklahoma came into Tuscaloosa and stunned the Crimson Tide with a 23-21 victory. We knew this Oklahoma team was good. We knew this Alabama team wasn't perfect, but we still had Alabama 4 for 4 in all of our cards covering the spread. So either of you guys, what went wrong for Bama here?
Yeah, I think Oklahoma's defense showed up. I have them on my card this week, and I'll get more into it. But their defense balled out, and were able to, not allow the Tide to, put up touchdowns, and they kept it close, and were able to pull it out. So I think defense is what ultimately won them that game.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's less of, I guess, sure, Simpson getting pick six earlier in the game did not help. But yeah, I think what this proves more than anything is Oklahoma's legit. They're really good. I swallowed my words with John Mateer last week. I actually didn't think he had an exceptional game against Alabama, but this spoils my card for them later. But he just seemed to be making big plays when they mattered, right? He had a rushing touchdown. He got creative. He didn't do anything like super special, but Oklahoma's defense really showed up, I'd say. And that's crazy to think that, Bama kind of went on this arc, and now they're back on the outside looking into the SEC.
Yeah, it's funny too, because we normally think of Oklahoma as a high-powered offensive team, right? And they've had their moments this year, but this year I think especially since Brent Venables has taken over, he's a defensive guy, right? Historically, but this is the first year I think where their defense has really balled out and been the topic of discussion. So just an interesting kind of dynamic there in Norman.
Yeah, absolutely. And, talking about playoff implications, both teams well alive in the hunt for an at-large spot. Oklahoma, obviously, this game, I don't want to say it didn't matter for them, but, I mean, this was a good win for them. They're 4-2 now in SEC play. So right now they're pretty much out of the conversation for a spot in the SEC title game. But now this really puts Alabama on their heels, because now they are 6-1. They're behind Ole Miss, who are also 6-1. Georgia, who are 7-1, who obviously if Alabama finishes tied with an SEC record, they'll probably get the advantage over Georgia because they beat Georgia. And then Texas A&M remains the only undefeated team both in SEC play and in overall play in the conference at 7-0. So right now it's pretty much the Aggies and then everybody else. So let's get into how these matchups affected the playoff field this week. This was the college football playoff field that we put out after our latest top 25 on Sunday, November 16th, which you can see at the House Enterprise blog. Obviously, based on a lot of the results that went down, Ohio State still on top. Indiana moving up after Texas A&M's win, even though they had to come from a pretty tough margin down 30-3 to eke out a 31-30 win. So they kind of moved down one spot, but they're still in the bye, so they're looking pretty good. Oklahoma obviously moving up, Notre Dame staying put, Ole Miss in the top 5, and JMU, it's important to note, we put JMU as our group of 5 representative down there at the 12 seed. Miami also notably getting the 11 seed, only getting that as the best team in the ACC. So important to note, they are out of the actual top 12, but are getting it as a result of being the best team in the ACC. And when you look at the actual college football playoff committee field that was put out last night, we were pretty darn close. Our top 4 is the same. Our bubble, I thought it was pretty interesting, is exactly the same with BYU, Utah, and Vanderbilt, respectively, kind of being the first three teams on the outside looking in. But they differed majorly from us by having Tulane as the Group of Five representative rather than James Madison. James Madison and Tulane were both in our top 25. Tulane was the only team in the top 25 in the Group of Five for the College Football Playoff Committee. So for you guys, what do you think the committee is looking at with Tulane and putting them over James Madison that we might not be seeing?
I think they just value the American more than the Sun Belt, right? I think there's just some bias there, but I do think that there's an opportunity for JMU to be that Group of Five representative. Depending on how things, happen over the next couple of weeks here, but as it stands right now, they've been favoring Tulane over JMU. I just think it's the conference that they're in, to be honest.
Yeah, you look at the American right now. At the top, you've got Navy, Tulane, North Texas, East Carolina, South Florida, and Memphis. And I think 4 of those teams have been ranked, if not 5. Maybe Navy. Was Navy ranked this year very briefly? I think they might have snuck in, possibly. I'm getting my wires crossed here, potentially. But, that's, to me, that stands out much more than, it's in the Sun Belt, it's James Madison, and then take your pick of Old Dominion or Southern Miss after that, right? I don't think any of those are. I don't think any of those programs, unless they really went out, are really on the precipice of success there. So it just goes to show it's a pretty strong American this year. I'd say it's the strongest it's been post merger after they kind of broke up, or post breakup, I guess, when they kind of divvied and gave everybody back to where they belong, like sending UConn back to the Big East. I just think it's a really strong American this year.
Yeah, the Americans' flirtation with being a power conference is definitely over. But it was very interesting in the 2010s. There were some very interesting combinations. Before we get into our picks, I wanted to point out that if you're watching this on YouTube, you might notice that you're also able to watch this both in landscape and portrait mode. Some great features from our partners at StreamYard. So really great for us. And it looks like we're getting a lot of new viewers, including Anthony, who has left a comment, booty shake. So thank you very much, Anthony. We really appreciate that. Let's get into our cards for the week. Starting off with Jake. I got to say, everyone had a really good week. Everyone has, I think for the first time all season, has put up a winning record in week 12. So let's keep it rolling. Jake, we're starting off with you. You had a pretty solid week. The one thing I wanted to point out that was on a lot of our cards last week, we all got Alabama minus 5.5 wrong, but almost all of us got Virginia plus 4.5 versus Duke right. And those of us that didn't get it right only didn't get it right because we didn't have it on our cards. Question for you guys. What were the books thinking by making Virginia the road dogs against the Blue Devils?
I don't know. I guess it was just not. Did they value? The only thing I can think of is they just valued, that UConn Duke game less than they should have. Right. It turns out, with the benefit of hindsight, UConn's a decent team this year. They're pretty good, right? Duke went on to I don't know. I've been baffled by this, right? I think Virginia has got a good defense and held them, right? I don't want to spoil my pick for Duke later, but feel like Duke favors the high scoring games, right? Whereas Virginia has been really, really good defensively this year too. So that's where I think things just got out of hand. So,
well, I think part of it too was the week prior to Virginia and Duke playing, Virginia lost to Wake, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So I think that had a big part in it, but Duke's been up and down all year. So I was surprised that they were favored. They were also at home, right? So it makes sense, but Virginia came out and just slapped them around.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into your card for week 13 and give us your regular picks, your locks, and then hold off on your game of the week.
All All right, let's do it. James Madison, a lot of talk about them. They're top 15 in the nation in defensive and offensive categories this year, right? We knew they were good. I don't think we really understand. I truly did not understand how good they were until I looked at the stats this year. I did not follow a lot of JMU football. Alonzo Barrett is playing his best ball at quarterback right now, and Washington State has been pretty terrible. So I think this is an easy two touchdown cover for James Madison. Going on to Tulane and Temple. Tulane's another interesting one, right? We talk about the American and kind of where they will end up. They're in for us right now. I think there was a lot of skepticism a couple of weeks ago against UTSA. They lost 48-26, and that is starting to look like a fluke because I think they're playing some really good ball after a great win at Memphis. They had an 11-point handling win over FAU, so those are some two big wins. What I love about Tulane the most is they're not just anchored by one stud receiver. They've got several guys who they feed consistently. 10 unique guys have at least one touchdown this year, right? Nobody has over 500 yards. That to me is really good. It's a deep team. They've got a lot of options. They can throw a lot of junk at you in the offensive playbook. So I think even though this is at the hostile Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia, I think they get it done against Temple. I think that's good for 7.5 points. BYU, I've been picking BYU. I think this is the third or fourth straight week for me. I came in here and said TCU. I think it was -3 or something like that. That was not enough. And I don't want to toot my own horn here, but 44-13 final. I think I had some sort of merit in saying that with hindsight. But look, covered machine. I think we have pretty even offenses here, which is interesting. This is actually a big game. Cincinnati on the heels of 2 straight losses. They're stumbling in here. So this is a really good time for BYU to face Cincinnati. I think if the offenses are too even, right, there's something that tips the scale for me. And I think it's a suffocating defense. And that's what BYU has proven they've had these past couple of weeks and even last couple of months. So I think BYU is good here for a field goal against Cincinnati. Buffalo and Miami, Ohio. This one's going right now. Last I saw, this was not very favorable for me. This was going into the third quarter, and Miami was up by 4. My thinking was it was insane. I don't know if you guys have followed this situation. I just caught myself up on this. Miami, Ohio's quarterback, DeQuan Finn. They benched him for illness last week. And it seemed a little weird because he just wasn't showing up to stuff beforehand and all this other stuff.
Didn't he say he's going to the NFL draft? He
abruptly left the program 2 days ago to say he's going to the NFL draft. So a lot of weird situation going on in Miami, Ohio right now.
I hate to break it to him, but he ain't getting drafted.
We'll see what happens. I would tend to agree with you. So I was thinking, hey, there's no chance in hell that Miami, Ohio is going to win this game on 2 days' notice with their backup quarterback. They seem to be proving me wrong at the moment. I don't know if we have a score check, but we will find out more later. The joys of live streaming.
I mean, you kind of feel like someone had to do it first, right? Like someone had to, because there have been, for the past couple of years now, people have been sitting out bowl games in preparation for the NFL draft, right? They want to make sure that they stay healthy and all that. And it's already stirred up enough controversy. But you kind of had to assume that the natural progression of that rhetoric was that somebody was going to take it a little too early in the regular season and try and sit out and help their draft stock. And obviously I think that's going to be the inverse, but I mean, I guess this is kind of a cautionary tale, right?
They're down to QB3 right now too. The Henry Hessen was going to go. He went 0 for 2. Then Thomas Gotowski came into the game, and they are up by 11 down the stretch. That looks like we can put a big red X next to that pick, even before the stream ends this evening. That might be a first. So shame on me for slandering the team that just squeaked by UMass this year. Not great. Oklahoma -8 against Missouri. I think I said a lot about Oklahoma earlier. Very simply put, John Mateer just made some big plays, right? Not flashy, nothing great, just back to fundamentals. The Dewey quarterback. I think Oklahoma's defense is not screwing around this year, as we've established. So I won't add more commentary than that. I think they manhandled Mizzou pretty swiftly and end Mizzou's season effectively, even though it was a great start. I think that's the nature of the beast with the SEC is you run into these buzzsaws, and then teams like Mizzou are on the outside looking in there. Also spoke about Duke a little bit. The thing about Duke now is they're stumbling in with 2 straight losses as well, right? But I think looking back, UNC does not do well when this game gets into a shootout, right? When they have teams score big, they just haven't kept up with them. And I think Duke can put it there, right? 9th in the nation in passing yards still. That's something that's probably going to turn into a problem here. If you exclude Richmond from North Carolina's schedule here, they haven't scored more than 27 in a game. All right, they took Syracuse, kind of to the woodshed, 27-10, but they've been largely a defensive team. And I think just with how potent Duke's offense is, it's going to be, this has a shootout all over it to me. And I think if it gets there, they're done for, to be quite frank. The home field advantage means close to nothing in these games because Duke is, mere miles down the street. So, even though it's a hostile UNC environment, I still think Duke goes in there, gets it done, turns it around a little bit. My FBS lock of the week here, FCS lock of the week, San Diego, the Toreros over Stetson. I've been wanting to play some action on the Toreros, but for the last few months, actually, and every time I kept going back to Toreros, I'm like, I don't like that matchup. This is one that I like. The Toreros is, they are just rolling right now. And I look at a guy like Cole Monick, who wears number 17, total stud, 6 TDs on the year, 795 yards. 3 of the last 4 games have been over 110 yards for him. 4 in a row for San Diego. I think they get it done here against Stetson, even though it's on the road. Last game of the year for them. Then FBS lock. I got Georgia Tech, boys. I don't know what we think about Pitt if we're going to start this discourse after Notre Dame kicked the crap out of them last week. But that was their wake-up call, and I think we're back on the rails for Pat Narduzzi getting the chopping block here in a couple weeks. That, I think, is more – Pitt has shown us what they are, right? They beat really bad teams, and they beat them really badly, which is great. But then they play Notre Dame, and it gets out of hand, right? That game was not competitive at any point. I think that's what Pitt is. I think Georgia Tech is, they skated by against BC last week. It was 2 weeks off, or the week off, so it was 2 weeks since they last played. Getting the rust off, I think they pick up where they left off, and we see what Georgia Tech is, which is a really good offensive team. NCAA best 496 yards a game. I'm not thinking too hard on this. I think this is Georgia Tech getting right, and Pat Narduzzi will be looking for employment in a couple of weeks here. That's my bold take out of this one.
Well, this is the real test, right? Because last week Pat Narduzzi said himself that the ACC games are what matters more. So now he's back in the ACC.
Hey, he doesn't care about Notre Dame. We've established that, right? He didn't care, right? Let's see if he cares about Georgia Tech. Because I have a feeling, boys, that he doesn't really care about Georgia Tech either. I really do. I'm sure he maybe wants to care, right? But I think we know what Pitt is right now, and I don't think they're that good. That's just my take.
And again, like we talked about that quote last week with Coach Narduzzi, and I think there's definitely a strong argument to be made that the current nature of college football and the way that getting into the playoff works now kind of gives more credit to his comment than people want to give, like in a way he is right. For a team like Pitt, the most important games right now are the ACC games. But now that he said that, the pressure's on. Now you're playing in the ACC, you got to go.
I will say this though. I mean, you look at Georgia Tech, right? They started out great. They were, atop the ACC. We've been talking about them all year, but a couple of weeks ago, they lose to North Carolina State, right? They get their first loss. And then last week, they barely got by BC, which BC is not a good team this year, as we know, right? So they've been struggling a little bit. So I think it's there for Pitt if they want it, right? I don't think it would be crazy if Pitt somehow beats Georgia Tech just because they've been struggling. But even if they beat Georgia Tech, then they got to go play Miami. So the rest of their season, it's a tough uphill climb.
Yeah, it's a huge uphill battle for the Panthers. Cole, you're in second place. You had a fantastic week.
Look
12.
at that. That's a lot of green.
Was the game of the week, which we all got wrong. And again, look, that Virginia plus 4.5. That's the gift that keeps on giving for all of us. I really like that UConn minus 7.5 pick. That worked out very well for you. Sacred Heart keeps rolling. And let's see what you got cooking in week 13. That's our standings. Now let's see what you got cooking in week 13.
All right. So I got Southern Miss. They're at South Alabama this week. 1.5. Look, Southern Miss last week coming off a tough loss against Texas State. They got their asses handed to them, quite frankly, 41-14. So how do they bounce back from that? They didn't have their starting quarterback, Braylon Braxton, who's been pretty solid for them this year. This week, it's going to come down to whether he plays or not. They haven't really said one way or the other. I think that makes a huge difference in this game because he's a much better option than their backup, Landry Liddy. So hopefully he gets to start and, he'll be able to play there. But, this Southern Miss team, we talked about the group of five, right? And James Madison kind of not getting respect out of the Sun Belt. Southern Miss is that other team right there in the Western division within the Sun Belt. They're trying to get to that championship game against JMU. So they need this win. They're currently 5-1 in the conference. They're trying to fight off Arkansas State and Troy, I believe, that are both 4-2. They have Troy next week to finish up their regular season. So this is a big game for them. They pretty much have to win out to get into that conference championship against JMU. So this is big. Look, Southern Miss last year, 1-11. They're 7-3 this year. That's a huge turnaround for 1 year. You got to give credit to their head coach, Charles Huff. He came over from Marshall. He was there for a couple of years, did a good job with Marshall Thundering Herd, and now he's in Southern Miss. So all props to them. I'm taking Southern Miss minus 1.5. I got ECU minus 2.5 against the UTSA Roadrunners. They're on the road at the Alamo Dome. Got them 2.5. They're on a sneaky 4-game win streak, the ECU Pirates. They had a huge win against Memphis last week. Memphis has been a pretty solid team all year. They kind of have, plateaued over the last couple of weeks, but still a big win if you're ECU looking at that. They're in the mix for the American too. They're not out of the conference championship game as well. They're 5-1 right now. They're 4th in the conference. You got Navy ahead of them. You got North Texas. You got Tulane. And look, if you look at their these other teams that they're going up against, Navy's at Memphis this week, right? So that's not a guaranteed win for Navy. And then they have to go play Army-Navy, and you never know what happens in that game, right? So Navy's not a lock in the American. North Texas, they're at Rice this week, and then they have Temple. And then Tulane is at Temple this week, and then has a Charlotte team the last week of the season. So, they need some help, the Pirates, but the opportunity's there. They got to take care of business this week against UTSA. They got the 14th ranked total offense in the entire country. They're averaging 466 yards per game. The UTSA defense, it's kind of been subpar this year. They've allowed 39 total touchdowns over 10 games. So I like the Pirates here to get the win on the road. Illinois, Wisconsin. Illinois is going to Camp Randall, play the Badgers, who have also struggled a ton this year. I got to say, Illinois, their defense the last 2 weeks, they've looked as best as they have all year. Their last 2 games, they only let up 13 points against Rutgers, 6 points against Maryland Terps. They're 5-1 this year at home. On the road, they've kind of been shaky, so we'll see what happens. But I think the big X factor in this game between the Fighting Illini and the Badgers is going to be Luke Altmaier, their quarterback, right? Because he started out the year so hot. He was on fire. The first 6 games, he threw 12 touchdowns, no interceptions. Since then, he's only thrown 9 touchdowns and he's thrown 5 picks. So he's been a little shaky. But the advantage that Illinois has in this game is Wisconsin cannot put up points. I mean, they're averaging 12 points per game all year. They have the dead last, other than UMass, because UMass shouldn't even be an FBS program, but right under UMass is Wisconsin in total offense. So they've just been brutal offensively on that side of the ball this year. So I'm taking Illinois in that game. Iowa State, Kansas. This one was kind of a tough one, but I'm going to take a gamble and take the Cyclones here. They got back on track a couple weeks ago. They beat TCU in a close game, but before then they lost 4 straight. They were winless in all of October. They had a bye week last week. So how do they bounce back from that? Rocco Beck, their quarterback, he's another one that's been kind of shaky this year. And, if you ask people in Ames, hasn't really lived up to the expectations that they had for him going into the year. And then you look at Kansas's quarterback, Jalen Daniels. He's been pretty good. He's thrown 21 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions this year. So, both defenses are, middle of the pack, mediocre. I could see this game producing a lot of points, being a shootout, just because the defenses aren't stopping, the offenses from putting up points. But, Iowa State, 3-3 this year in 1 possession games. So, you never know what you're going to get for them. I'm taking them this week just because they're at home. I think that they beat Kansas and they're able to cover by 4.5. Oklahoma and Mizzou, Jake talked a lot about this. We talked about it at the beginning of the show. Huge win last week for Oklahoma against Bama. The week before, they beat Tennessee, both on the road. They went into both, Neyland Stadium, Bryant-Denny, 2 very difficult places to play, and they got wins, right? They finished the year off now with Mizzou this week, and then they got LSU, and they're in Norman for both. They're at home. So, the college football committee has them at 8 right now. They're in the playoff. If it ended today, they kind of control their own destiny going forward. So I think they got to take advantage of that, win out, and then you get your spot in the college football playoff. We talked a little bit about it at the beginning of the program, but, their defense last week, 17 points off 3 turnovers, forcing Alabama to turn the ball over. That makes a huge difference. I think that continues this week. They didn't have Mason Thomas, one of their best defensive players. He didn't play last week. He might be back this week, which would be a huge help. So I'm taking the Sooners there. My FBS lock of the week, I got Tulane at Temple -7.5. We also mentioned this earlier. Tulane's in the mix right now. They're not only fighting for a spot in the American to get in that conference championship game, but they're also trying to hold on to that group of 5 auto bid right now that the college football committee is saying that they're the team, right? So they got to show out these last couple of weeks. They got to take care of business if they want to keep that auto bid spot. And also, there's been a lot of talk about their head coach, John Sumrall, going to other schools. I saw it today. I'm not sure if it's accurate. I only saw, one little blurb about it, but that Florida rescinded him coming to meet with them. So looks like he might be staying in Tulane, but he crushed the team this week in the media, totally laid into them and torched them, said that, I don't know how we're a ranked team, because if we're a ranked team, there must be a lot of, bad college football teams out there, because we've been, pretty mediocre this year. So I think that should light a fire under that team's ass. And I think that, the Green Wave come out and get a big win against Temple. So taking them for FBS. FCS, taking the UNH Wildcats versus UMaine. UNH, they're on a 4-game win streak. They've been hot. They're finishing up the season. This is their last game. They're at home. I like them at home. And, since 2007, head-to-head against Maine, they're 15-3. So, they're winning most of these matchups year in and year out. They're 8-1 against the Black Bears at home. So I'm taking the Wildcats again this year to get a victory.
Love it. One thing I noticed about your card, Southern Miss versus South Alabama. I did some quick research. Those schools are separated by like a 2-hour drive, right?
Yeah.
They're in the same conference. South Alabama leads the series all time, 5-0. They've only been playing each other since like 2020. But, Southern Miss, South Alabama, you're so close. You're in the same conference. I feel like that's a ripe opportunity for a rivalry trophy, which we love on the Football House, and there isn't one, and that just makes me a little sad. So I think we should take some time. If Southern Miss kind of breaks this losing streak, we should take some time in the offseason and work on a rivalry trophy for those two teams, because that would be very fun. Tondo's card, he had a pretty solid week. He's itching to get back over 500. He also, again, took advantage of that. Virginia plus 4.5 versus Duke. Louisville minus 2.5 versus Clemson. I kind of wanted to talk about that for a second. Clemson came away with the 1-point victory. Louisville kind of out of the picture now for the ACC, probably out of the picture for the playoff. What went wrong for the Cardinals against the Tigers?
Yeah, I just thought they couldn't do anything offensively, right? And it was a little too late for what they were able to do. They had a terrible fourth quarter. They couldn't get anything on the board. They let up a key touchdown to Clemson late. Let's see what Miller Moss did here. I want to get his full stats, but I don't think he had a tremendous game. Yeah, 19 for 27, 212. He ran for a touchdown, but wasn't really able to get much over the air. Relied a lot on the run game there, and Kewan Brown was basically a one-man show. I just thought their defense could make a big stop too, right? Like that's all they had to do is keep Clemson at bay and, hold them to a field goal, make them fight for everything. Clemson has shown they're not really, that great of a comeback team this year, and they shut everybody up. It was a bit disappointing for Louisville. I thought that would be cake. That was on my card as well.
Yeah, and they were at home. They should have won that game, like you were saying, Jake. I mean, they were leading going into the fourth quarter. They really couldn't stop the run game. Adam Randall, Clemson's running back, he ran for over 100 yards on 15 carries, 2 touchdowns on the ground. So it was a prime opportunity for Louisville to take care of business with a struggling Clemson team this year, and they just couldn't do it. So,
and let's get into Tondo's card for this week. He's got Tulane minus 7.5 versus Temple, Nebraska plus 8 versus Penn State, Tennessee minus 4.5 versus Florida, Arizona State minus 7.5 versus Colorado, BYU minus 2.5 versus Cincinnati, Air Force plus 3.5 versus New Mexico. His FCS lock is Harvard moneyline versus Yale. Very important game. I'll get into that in a second. And his FBS lock is UNLV minus 2.5 versus Hawaii. Harvard versus Yale, very important. Not only is there an Ivy League championship on the line, but for the first time, a spot in the FCS playoffs are on the line. As some of you may have known, last year the Ivy League agreed that they will start participating in the FCS championship. Obviously, a lot of you who follow the FCS side of college football know that for many years the Ivy League championship has pretty much been it for Ivy League teams. Their season usually ends around this time, but now they are playing for a spot for a national title. It could be the first time we've seen an Ivy League team win a national title in decades. So for you guys, anything that you really like out of Tondo's card this week?
I think the BYU Cincinnati game is huge, right? Because BYU is not a lock to get in that Big 12 conference championship. Right now, they're at the number 2 spot behind Texas Tech. But if Cincinnati beats them, then they both have 2 conference losses. Cincinnati would have the head-to-head. So there's the Big 12 right now, other than Texas Tech, is pretty much wide open. I think Texas Tech has West Virginia this week. West Virginia, we talked a little bit about them last week. They've been on a great run. But other than Texas Tech, you have BYU, then there's Utah, Houston, Arizona State, Cincinnati. There's a lot of teams in the mix there, and depending on tiebreakers and all that, if BYU loses against Cincinnati this week, we might see one of those teams playing Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship.
Love it. All right, let's get into my card. And guys, I had a winning week. So yes, please clap it up. If you're watching right now in the comments, please clap it up for me. One more time, give a booty shake for me.
Yeah.
Probably one of the best comments we've gotten on one of our live streams so far.
Easily.
Thank you, Vertical Video from StreamYard. Obviously, I took advantage of Virginia plus 4.5. We're not going to get into that again. Louisville gave me trouble. USF gave me trouble. Navy coming out on top and effectively knocking USF out of the college football playoff picture. But let's get into my card for this week. Not going to, retread a lot of ground here. Georgia Tech minus 2.5 versus Pitt. Tennessee minus 4.5 versus Florida. BYU minus 2.5 versus Cincinnati. UConn minus 7.5. Harvard money line versus Yale. I'm including 2 FCS cards because 2 FCS games on my card this week because I think there's another game that's very important. And first, I've got Harvard money line versus Yale. I think they'll take the Ivy League championship and represent the Ivy in the FCS playoffs. Then I've got Jacksonville State money line versus FIU. My FCS lock, I'm including 2 FCS games this week because I think this one is equally as important in the Northeast in terms of college football as Harvard Yale, and that is Lehigh money line versus Lafayette. Lehigh is perfect in the Patriot League so far this year, and with a win against one of their biggest rivals, actually their biggest rival, period. For those of you who are not familiar with this rivalry, it is super heated, and that's the thing I love about stuff like this, where it's like this Rand Crusader Cup. Like, we all know the Iron Bowl is crazy. We all know Ohio State, Michigan's crazy, but I just love the way and how passionate these two fan bases get for a game that in most years is really just for them. But for this year, it's also for a Patriot League championship, and so I've got Lehigh taking this one over the Leopards. My FBS lock of the week, ECU minus 2.5 versus UTSA. ECU low-key looking good out of the American. They are low-key bowl ready for 2025, and that will bring us to our game of the week. Our game of the week obviously is a huge matchup in the Big 12. Our game of the week is obviously a huge matchup in the Big 10, and that is USC versus Oregon. 2 programs. Oregon, one is right now in contention for the college football playoff. They need a little bit of help to get in contention for the Big 10 championship game because right now they're actually sitting below USC, who is sitting right now outside the bubble in the college football playoff, but they are 3rd in the Big 10. They are both 6-1, so a win for either of these teams will obviously knock the loser out of contention for the Big 10 championship, but a win for USC would also rocket them into at-large contention for the college football playoff. So we've got 2 really talented squads going up in this one here. It's going to be in Eugene at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday. Cole, how do you feel like this one's going to go down?
Oh, man, I don't know. It's going to be a tight game, I think. You got on one side USC. I mean, both sides, really. 2 great offenses. Oregon's been kind of up and down, all year. But you take a look at the USC Trojans. They're the 6th-ranked offense in the entire country. Lincoln Riley has done a good job and has, really gotten them going this year. Jordan Mailata under center has been great. Makai Lemon, their star receiver, he's a problem. Oregon's been pretty good in pass coverage. They've struggled more with the run this year defensively, but, USC is capable of hitting those big home run plays. And, I think they're going to be an issue for Oregon this week. You look at Oregon and some of the games they played this year, tight game against Penn State earlier in the year where it went into overtime. That Iowa game, they weren't able to put up many points, and that was a close one. Those were both away games for them, though, so they do have the advantage of being at home, and their only home loss this year was to Indiana. So I think it's going to be an exciting one, but I say don't count out USC. My pick for the week, I'm taking USC on the spread, plus 9.5. I do think Oregon squeaks it out, but I expect this one to be an exciting one that comes down to the wire. I think it's going to be a lot of fireworks and it's going to be a fun one to watch.
Yeah, Jake, who's going to be the difference maker in this one?
Oh, man. I'll answer that question first, and I think Dante Moore is just getting caught at if you're USC, like, yeah, I think they're so talented, and I'll get into them in a sec. But Dante Moore, they're catching him after one of his best games, right? He's heating up at the right time. With career best 306. Oregon single game record 90% completion too. So he's just been so efficient, right? So it's a tall order right now for USC to come in there and wreak havoc against a guy that I think would be the first to tell you he's playing the best football he's ever played. Now, that all said, I'm reading an article right now about if USC will rediscover its Sam Darnold magic. And that was the last time College Game Day went or not even went to USC, that USC football was featured, right? It was 2016, and I don't remember this game, honestly, but Sam Darnold engineered a great 26-13 win over Washington, who was number 4. That was in Seattle. It was on the road, right? Shades of this a little bit, right? You're going to the Pac Northwest. You're probably the underdog by most accounts here. Yeah, it's a super trendy pick to pick USC. I don't know. For me, this comes down to Oregon. It just comes down to their passing game being back on the rails for me, right? Like I look at Dante Moore and I think this is a terrible time to catch him. So that's why I have -9 for Oregon. I do think, I don't disagree that this could be one of those games that's really close almost all game, and then Oregon finds a way to dig deep in the fourth quarter, second half, as they've done for most of this year. So that's where my heart tells me to go on this one.
I do think you make a good point too, Jake, because if Oregon loses this game, I think they're out of the college football playoff.
It could be.
Wow. Could you elaborate on that? I mean, their only other loss would be to the second best team in the country.
Yeah, but you got to look at all the other teams, right, that are in the Big Ten. So Ohio State at number 1, Indiana at number 2, right? They're locks pretty much, right? No matter what happens for the rest of the year, they're getting in. If Oregon loses to USC then could potentially in some way, they could get to the Big Ten championship, right? And if that happens, you'd have to get help from Michigan. But if USC beats Oregon on the road and then somehow ends up their way into the Big Ten championship and just wins out for the rest of the year, like USC's getting in the playoff. You can't deny them at that point. And then there's that whole other topic, right? In order for that to happen, USC to get into the Big Ten championship, you got Michigan and Ohio State in the game at the end of the year. Michigan would have to win that game, right? And if Michigan beats Ohio State, they have an argument as well. I mean, they only have 2 losses, and they would have beaten the number 1 undisputed all year, number 1 team in the entire country, right? And then you have a conversation, do we put in 4 teams from the Big Ten? Do you put in USC and Michigan in addition to Indiana and Ohio State?
Yeah.
It gets a little tricky there. And then I think if you have those 4 teams in that scenario, I think Oregon is the odd man out.
Love that.
I mean, a lot of it happened for that to come to fruition, but I think it is possible.
Yeah, and I just think the SEC is too good right now for a 4-team Big Ten, unfortunately. I think we're pretty close to getting –
Well, I think it depends what happens. I mean, if Bama loses to Auburn in the Iron Bowl, then maybe not, right? But if they take care of business, then, yeah, the SEC's going to have probably 5 teams in. You're looking at Georgia, Ole Miss, A&M, Bama, and Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it depends what happens in these other conferences as well with the Big Ten. I would say right now, heading into this week, USC and Michigan, in my opinion, they're still in contention.
Love it. For the record, I've got USC plus 9.5 versus Oregon. I wanted to double up and take Oregon money line. So I guess I can flirt with that. I don't have that on my card, but I'm feeling it. And Tondo is feeling USC plus 9.5 versus Oregon, and he also put Oregon explicitly money line on his card. So that's our game of the week. Huge implications for the Big Ten, huge implications for the playoff. USC becoming the perfect late season spoiler in the national picture and in the Big Ten. So, guys, as we wrap up, any more games on this Week 13 slate that you feel like are worth checking out?
I mean, we talked a little bit about it, but Georgia Tech and Pittsburgh, that's huge. That's going to have implications in the ACC. Virginia still hanging around. I mean, right now, Miami, they have Miami in the playoff. I don't see how Miami is a playoff team. They're probably not even going to play in the ACC championship. I don't see how you put Miami in, whoever wins the ACC, put Miami in over them. But I don't know. We'll see. Big 12, wide open. Texas Tech, BYU, like we said. So there's still a lot of football to be ironed out. And I think that the bracket that came out this week of these 12 teams that are currently in it, that could look a lot different between now and the first round of the college football playoff.
Actually, before we go, can we pull up the bracket one more time? Because I totally agree. I think a lot of things – this bracket is subject to a lot of change over the next 2 weeks. Which teams do you feel like are you super comfortable saying are definitely in?
Ohio State, Indiana, Georgia, A&M, Ole Miss.
And Ole Miss?
Yeah.
That's
probably
I'm with that. And
probably Notre Dame at this point too, I would say, because who does Notre Dame have? Do they play UCLA this week?
They have who does Notre Dame have? They have Syracuse, so that's one they got to take care of, you know.
Yeah. Syracuse and then Stanford. So if they win both those games, they're in. So I think Notre Dame's a lock. I mean, Oklahoma, if they win out, they're in, right? It just depends what happens. But I think the teams right now that like they can't lose, like Oregon, Alabama, Miami, Tulane, if they lose, does James Madison finally get that spot and, get the respect from the committee? I don't know. But, I think those top 4 teams right now that have buys, those are all locks. And I think, probably Notre Dame would be the other one, Ole Miss. But
what about Texas Tech?
Texas Tech, I mean, I think whoever wins the Big 12 is going, right? So if BYU takes care of Cincinnati and it's Texas Tech versus BYU in the Big 12 championship, whoever wins that game's going, and whoever doesn't isn't. So the Big 12 is only going to have one representative. So
you wouldn't be surprised if Texas Tech falls from right now the 5th spot to out of the playoff if they lose the Big 12.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised because you just have all those SEC teams in Big 10,
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. So that's going to wrap it up for this week of the Football House. Glad that a lot of new viewers were able to join us for our vertical video. And once again, let's give a shout out to Mr. Anthony Blake, who says booty shake. Make sure you keep following us on the socials that you see below if you're watching in landscape, above if you're watching in portrait mode. Make sure you head to the House Enterprise blog at house-enterprise.com for updated articles on college football, a lot of college basketball stuff. I just put up a recap of a fantastic 2025 Champions Classic on the House of College Hoops, so you should go check that out. We've got a huge lineup of sports coming up for Thanksgiving. We've got NFL, obviously we're going to be talking about. We've got Feast Week for college basketball, and then next week's Football House is going to be fantastic because it is rivalry week. There's a lot of as good as the games that we have on our cards are. I feel like it was kind of tough making this week's card because there are a couple stinkers. A lot of teams, especially in the SEC, are getting ready for some big games next week. Obviously, Texas A&M is playing Samford this week, so I don't want to throw that in there. But until then, for Cole Hughes, Jake Zimmer, I'm Sam Basil. This has been the Football House, and we'll see you guys next time.